In 2010, Mason was appointed as a Knight Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Maori health and public health services. Tēnei tangata ko te kingi o tātou. Tā Mason, hara mai koe e te papa. Ho mai te paki.
Tuatahi, te kai whakarite, tēnā koe e koro, nau I te mata ai tō tātou nau hui I roto I te karakia. O tira te arawa waka, te arawa iwi, tēnā koutou. Nā koutou te reo pōheri, te reo karanga, ko tai mai mātou, ki tēnei o tātou nau hui, no reira tēnā tātou katoa. Well, there's only 3 points that I wanted to make today. The first one is that there is no single reason that explains suicide. There are a number of reasons that come together and we need to consider them all. And following on from that, and because of that, there's no single action that will prevent suicide. We need to look at a wider range of actions. And the third point, the numbering there is not quite right, is it? It's 2 1 2. The third point is that this hui, Turamarama ki te ora, provides an opportunity for us to think about Indigenous determination and how we might work collectively to have the greatest impact. So great to be here this morning, Minister tēnā koe nau I puta mai wanganui a tātou. I just want to go to the first point, and that is to look at the determinants of suicide. And one way of doing it is to talk about the 6 Ds. Dispossession, when people have lost their land and lost their language and lost their culture and their dignity and autonomy, they're in a vulnerable position. And that occurs all too often for Indigenous people. And when people become dispirited, when their spirit is languishing, when they lose hope, when they're dejected and humiliated, they're also in a vulnerable position. And we know that people who are disadvantaged because they're unemployed, or their education has been thwarted, or their health is poor, or the houses they live in are substandard houses, when their incomes are low, we know that disadvantage creates its own difficulties. And if people live in destructive environments filled with alcohol and drugs and social media and violence and bullying, they're also in a vulnerable position. Very often, suicide is associated with disorders of depression and psychosis and chronic diseases and unrelenting pain. And it's also associated with desertion, when people are abandoned, when they lose the love that they could expect, when they lack support, when they become alienated from family and friends, and when their peers reject them, they're also in a vulnerable position. So we have a number of factors that contribute to suicide. The task we have is how to move from mauri noho to mauri ora, how to move the spirit from languishing to a spirit that is flourishing. And that's the aim of prevention. And there are a number of ways of looking at it. How do we combat destructive environments? We need community action to do that. How do we combat disorders of health? We need treatment early on to do that, not at a late stage, at an early stage. When people feel deserted, we need to work out how they might feel included. And when people are dispossessed, we need to look at how can we restore the rights of people who have lost their land and their language and their culture. And when people are dispirited, when the spirit is low, how can that be healed? And when people are in a disadvantaged position, what are the policies and the programs that need to be put in place so that they can experience a sense of equity? Can't move that. Oh, yeah. Just want to, you'll have heard of a program called Rotorua, and that's a program that's been running now for 2 or 3 years, and it's looking largely at the prevention of suicide. It's got two components to it, Maori and Pacific working together, because the problems of suicide affect both Maori and Pacific, and there are a number of community projects that Rotorua has been involved in, and there are equally a number of projects that the Pacifica team have been involved in, particularly the Flow program that they have been doing. What we've learned from this is that there are a number of ways, number of actions that we can put in place that will go some way to revitalise the mauri. Remember, that's the aim. How do you shift from mauri noho to mauri ora, from languishing to flourishing? And there are a number of ways of doing that. Right at the top, of course, is families and whānau. Whānau hold a key point, key players in the elevating of mauri. But community action is important. Healers are important. The helping services, whether they be health or education or social work, are important. Iwi have an important role to play here, and so does local government and central government. And more than that, there is a worldwide action that is needed as well. We're talking here about an Indigenous issue, which is a global issue. Talking a little bit first at families in action. Fostering, the aim is to have whānau who are strong, resilient and flourishing. Importantly, whānau need to be able to share the good moments and the not so good moments. We've heard already that it's important to be able to talk about resentments, to talk about hurts, to talk about violence when it's occurred, and for families to be able to manage that and deal with it rather than not dealing with it. Ready to discuss upsets, things that have gone wrong without being too quick to make a judgment, but most importantly, how whānau can transfer positive values, how they can transfer land, how they can transfer heritage, and how they can build a kawa. We have a kawa that operates on every marae in this country. We don't always have a kawa that operates in every whānau in this country. And there's a challenge there to do that. We've got some great examples already in operation here. The 1,000 Days Trust launched recently in Invercargill, looking at how families can get the best out of their best foundations for their children in the first 1,000 days of life. We've got Land Trust, and the Tūpoho Land Whānau Trust is an example of a land trust that really wants whānau to do well in every sense of the word. There are iwi that have whānau days, so there's already been quite a lot of work done to build strong and resilient whānau, but we need to do more to do that. The other point is that if we're looking at community action, the first point is communities need to own the problem. Suicide in any community is a community problem, and unless communities say, yes, it is our problem, we'll deal with it, we'll help it, then we simply sweep it under the carpet. A great event last year, 8th of October 2015, the people of Kaikohe came together as a community and walked on the hikoi of hope. They made public that the suicides that were occurring there were their problem and that they ought to take some responsibility for it. And at the Healing Our Spirits conference last year, the Rotorua group, community leaders and champions from around the country, Maori and Pacific, came together to share their knowledge about suicide prevention. So an important role for communities to own this problem and to speak up about it. The other thing communities need to be looking at is outing the risks. What are the risks that operate in a community, and what can we do about it? Communities need to be concerned about how many alcohol outlets do you need in a particular community, and need to be able to speak up about that. How do you stop cyberbullying? That's a community problem. We need to take some steps towards that. What about family violence and depression and suicide, domestic violence, child poverty? These are all community issues. They're risks that can lead to suicide. Communities can help this by outing the risks, making the risks clear, and then working out how these risks can be minimised. Then there are some great examples already in operation of communities who are in action, who want to build resilience, and not only that, enjoy the journey. So Te Papa Takaroa Tiaroa, a long-standing program in this town, which uses sport and recreation and exercise as an opportunity for families to celebrate together and to work together and to enjoy the journey. The Mauri event, which occurs every year in Hawke's Bay, is a wonderful example of how whānau resilience can be built in a way that is helpful. The Minister is a regular competitor in the Mauri event. The Lakes Trust in Rotorua is doing some great work in building resilience. The Taitumu Trust, who gave a presentation yesterday, is a program that looks at young people who have had no previous experience in water, often from disadvantaged backgrounds, coming together to learn resilience, to learn how to cope with water, and out of that, to learn how to cope with other things in life. So some great examples already of programs. Matatini, a huge example of how communities can come together and develop programs of resilience that are enjoyable, but more than that, which lead to a different way of life. Healers, healing the hurt. Healers in action, and there are a number of healers operate. Some operate with a religious background, some with a tikanga background. The important point is that we have healers already working who know how to lift the spirit, and that's their aim. They do it in different ways, but they want to mend the hurt, make amends for the past, help restore the balance where balance has been lost, and strengthen the resolve of people to continue in a very positive way. We have a number of helping services in this country and in other countries. Their strength is whether or not they can come together and work collectively rather than independently. But importantly, for all helping services, they've got to be accessible. Accessible means not only that they're affordable, but they know how to deal with the people who come to them. And where people who are helping have the same cultural background as people who are being helped, the outcomes are inevitably better. Sometimes services, it's not a question of people coming to help, but of services going out to help. Programs that operate in schools, programs that operate in the workplace, programs that operate in homes have a better way of engagement very often than expecting people to come to a central service. Services have got to be timely. If we're talking about prevention, we want it early on, not late on. And we want to know that these services are effective. Effective means that the outcomes are good, and not enough simply to solve a problem. An effective service is one which helps people to flourish. So quite a difference between solving a problem and flourishing. If you have an illness or a sickness and you're treated for the sickness, it doesn't mean you're flourishing. So if you don't have a problem, you're not necessarily flourishing. The aim of services is to go beyond solving the problem, to lift the spirit so that people know how to flourish. And we've had different ways of looking at services. Typically, we ask, what's the matter with this person? The bigger question, the one that's likely to lead to more positive outcomes, is the question, what matters to this person? So that the engagement is a much more mutual one rather than a one-sided engagement. Some great examples of community services that are working together, and the Te Aroha Whānau Water Collective, for example, brings together a whole range of communities who previously were working quite independently, but now want to work together. They all contribute in different ways, but the aim is the same. The aim in the end is to help their people flourish, and they do that better if they work together, share facilities, share knowledge, share expertise, so that the best outcomes can be obtained. Great examples also of the work that iwi are doing to improve the circumstances of their people, not necessarily by providing services, but by looking at adding value to what government services do. The example at present in South Auckland at Te Puia Marae, where Tainui Iwi are helping people who don't have homes, who don't have anywhere to go. They've provided temporary shelter for them and have pledged to try and find more permanent accommodation for them. So a whole range of options there. There's a small school in Palmerston North called Manukura, which an iwi is involved in. The same iwi is involved in another small school, Te Kura o Kowhata. So all around the country, iwi are getting involved in ways which are going to increase resilience and add to success. So we're talking here about not just dealing with the risks, but building programs which lead to success. We also need, I was going to say we need a government, but we need government actions. We need government actions that can lead to a society that's fair and a society that's just. Legislation, laws, where economic, social, cultural and environmental policies can be intertwined rather than treated as if they're separate, because they are not separate. We need policies that will eliminate poverty. We need policies that will reduce the inequities that exist within society. And we certainly need policies that recognise indigeneity and recognise Indigenous cultures. So a huge role here for central government. But we also need worldwide action. We're talking about a global issue, and so we look to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and to the role that they might have to make all nation states in the world aware of the problem and recognise Indigenous suicide as a global challenge. So we need to reframe the approach a little. Preventing suicide depends on how you convert mauri noho, languishing, to mauri ora, flourishing. We do that by building positive relationships at home, at school, at work, finding catalysts that give people a reason to live, highlighting the potential as well as the problem, recognising that you can flourish even when adversity is in front of you, recognising the importance of Indigenous cultures and communities, increasing protective factors and reducing risk factors, adopting a community-wide approach, making sure that national policies, it's not national party, that's national state policies, are fair and just and enabling, and making suicide prevention a worldwide goal. So really owe a great gratitude to Ngāti Pukeao Trust for arranging this hui. This is an important hui, the second time that they've been involved in this. And I mentioned at the beginning that there are only 3 points I wanted to make. The first was that there's no single reason that it can account for suicide. I highlighted 6 of those: dispossession, dispirited, disadvantage, destructive environments, disorders, and desertion. And we looked that there's no single action that will prevent suicide. We need action by whānau, at community levels, from healers, from services, iwi, local and central government, and worldwide action. And the third point, what has this got to do, or how can this hui make itself, bring together all the knowledge and all the experiences and all the stories that have come out of this today and will continue to come out of it tomorrow? How can we bring them together so that they have some impact? So how do we give effect to the knowledge that we've been sharing yesterday, we'll share today, and we'll share tomorrow? And one way of doing that is for us to develop a strong statement, a declaration, the Turamarama Declaration, which sets out what we might want to achieve and how that might be done. And it might go along these lines. We, participants in Turamarama Ki Te Ora Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference held in Rotorua from the 1st to the 3rd of June 2016, are deeply concerned about the high rate of suicide among Indigenous peoples. We weep for the increasing number of our people whose lives have been cut short by suicide. We declare that all our people should be able to live well into old age. We believe that the will to live well is strong when the human mauri is strong. Living well means being able to live as Maori, as Indigenous peoples, and as citizens of the world. We will strive to build safe and nurturing communities that generate confidence, integrity, inclusion, equity, and goodwill. We recognise the key roles that whānau and families play in strengthening the Māori by transferring knowledge, culture, language, values, resilience, and love to their children and grandchildren. We endorse the benefits of tikanga, kawa, healing, and other Indigenous cultural protocols to lift the spirit and strengthen our people in schools, health centres, sporting clubs, social media, the workplace, and the streets. We expect health, education, and all social service providers to offer services that are accessible, timely, and effective for Indigenous peoples. We urge our own Indigenous leaders, tribal authorities, and community champions to create opportunities for our children, youth, women, men, and our older people so they can be part of Te Ao Māori and Indigenous worlds and can be active participants in communities where they live and work. We challenge national and local authorities to adopt and enforce regulations that reduce the availability of alcohol and other harmful substances, to ensure that homes are warm, comfortable, and affordable, to insist that streets, workplaces, schools, and the internet are all safe places for our peoples, and to combat practices that diminish self-worth and destroy hope. And we call out on our elected leaders in Parliament, especially those who have responsibilities for education, social services, health, housing, employment, Indigenous development, and the environment, to work together in order to create a society where equity of access, equitable outcomes, and extended opportunities can become realities for Indigenous peoples. We recommend that our people who are working in the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues make all nation states aware of the extent of Indigenous suicide and ensure that suicide prevention for Indigenous peoples will be highlighted in the United Nations Millennium Goals. And finally, we pledge ourselves to work collectively so that our combined energies can create a world where the Māori can flourish and all our people can live well into old age. Māori ora.